He smiled when he served the papers, a cold, arrogant smile. He thought he was untouchable. He thought I was just the quiet wife, but he made a mistake, a multi-million-dollar mistake, because while he was busy lying to his lawyers, I was building my defense, not with pity, not with tears, but with the only thing that truly matters in his world, his numbers. And I was about to use them to take back every single penny he stole. This is the true story of how I took half of his company to build my new, richer life. The house was cold, not from the winter outside, but from the silence inside. 10 years, a decade of my life, built into this foundation, poured into this marriage, and now it was ending not with a whimper, but with the sharp, sickening sound of a slamming steel vault door. Michael didn't just want a divorce. He wanted to erase me. I was the silent partner, you see, the one who built the spreadsheets, who ran the late-night logistics, who mortgaged her own inheritance to give his tech company, Apex Dynamics, its first breath of life. Everyone saw Michael, the charismatic founder, the visionary. I was just the quiet wife at the holiday party, smiling politely. But when he handed me the divorce papers, the smile was gone, replaced by a cold, devastating realization. He hadn't just filed for divorce. He had calculated a financial siege. The papers were a masterpiece of manipulation. He claimed the company, Apex, had no marital value, listing it as a pre-existing asset from before our wedding day. He had secretly shifted major accounts, manipulated stock options, and funneled profits through shell corporations in the months leading up to the filing. My name, the name that had signed the original loan documents, had vanished from the operating agreement. He was offering me a pittance, a meager severance package, essentially trying to buy 10 years of my life and professional labor for the price of a used car. He wanted to leave me with nothing but the house debt and a broken heart. The betrayal wasn't just in the cheating, which I had already forgiven once. The betrayal was in the numbers. It was in the cold, meticulous way he tried to deny my very existence, my contribution, my intellectual property. He looked me in the eye, that confident, arrogant gaze, and dared to say, "You didn't build this, Sarah." I did. That night, standing in the cold kitchen light, the paperwork scattered on the marble counter, the raw pain turned into something much harder, much colder. It wasn't the fiery rage you read about, it was a still, frozen lake of resolve. He had underestimated me. He had forgotten who taught him how to analyze a balance sheet. He forgot that while he was out charming investors, I was the one who perfected the algorithm that made Apex worth millions. He saw me as an emotional liability. I decided I would be his financial nemesis. He thought he had hidden everything in his complex web of offshore accounts and shell companies. But he had forgotten one crucial detail. He had forgotten my memory. I didn't need his current books. I had the original data, the early contracts, the foundational agreements, the things he thought were long deleted. I had the truth, deep in my archives, the receipts for every single minute of my labor, every penny of my inheritance. He wanted to play a game of numbers? Fine. I would show him what a true analyst could do when she was fighting for her very survival. His downfall wouldn't be loud or dramatic. It would be legal, devastating, and entirely deserved. He tried to steal my future. I was going to take back half his kingdom and build my own. And the look on his face when he realized his quiet wife was the architect of his financial ruin, that, I knew, would be priceless. That would be my revenge. My first move wasn't calling a lawyer, it was calling my old archives. Before the digital age devoured everything, I had kept physical copies. I went to the dusty storage unit beneath my parents' old home, a place Michael never knew existed. There, in waterproof boxes, were the original receipts for the decade we built Apex, the receipt for the $100,000 personal loan I took against my future inheritance to fund their first server, the email exchange proving I designed the core financial tracking code before we were even engaged, the meticulously kept journal detailing my 80-hour work weeks during the company's crucial startup phase. He had removed my name from the ownership ledger, but he couldn't delete the historical reality of my labor and investment. I didn't hire the first high-profile, aggressive divorce attorney I found. I hired a specialized forensic accountant named David Chen. David was quiet, ruthless, and had a reputation for seeing through the smoke screens of wealthy cheats. When I laid out my small, precise mountain of evidence, the old receipts, the original codebase, the shell corporation names, David didn't gasp. He smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a hunter spotting its prey. "Sarah," David said, his voice flat and calm. "Michael is a liar, but he's a lazy one. He used standard offshore banking tactics. He assumed you were too emotional to look at the money." "He was wrong," I replied. "I built the system." "I know its flaws. Our strategy was not to fight for a share of Michael's wealth. Our strategy was to prove that I was one of the original founders of Apex Dynamics, and that Michael had systematically committed fraud against a co-owner of the company. We were going for an ownership stake, not alimony. We weren't asking for money from him, we were reclaiming my asset. The first mediation session was a cold theater of arrogance. Michael walked in with his slick attorney, James, radiating expensive confidence. Michael looked at me with a condescending pity, expecting me to cry or crumble under pressure. He offered me his final, insulting number. I didn't speak. I let David speak for me. David simply laid two things on the table: the original $100,000 loan receipt with my signature, dated 2 years before the marriage, and a detailed printout showing my original code contributions. "My client is not interested in alimony, Michael," David stated, his voice cutting through the tension. "My client is interested in her 50% stake in the intellectual property she helped fund and create." Michael burst out laughing, a loud, booming fake laugh intended to intimidate. "That's ridiculous. She was my secretary, my housewife. You have no proof of contribution." David just nodded, picking up a third document. "Oh, we have proof. And we also have the sworn depositions of 3 former employees you laid off last year, all confirming Sarah's role as chief financial architect in the founding years. Furthermore, we have this." He slid across a new document, a formal letter filed with the court, detailing Michael's use of marital assets to fund a secret European vacation with his mistress, which we had meticulously documented through credit card statements and flight records. The laughter died in Michael's throat. His face, usually so smooth and confident, twisted into a mask of pure panic. The financial fraud was one thing, but the moral betrayal laid bare was another. The power dynamic had shifted completely. I was no longer his victim. I was his auditor, his judge, and his jury. The discovery phase that followed was relentless. Michael's lawyers, initially dismissive, suddenly found themselves fighting against a tide of internal data they thought was permanently deleted. I had archived everything: meeting minutes, old business plans, even casual texts where Michael admitted I was the only one who truly understood their complex financial modeling. I spent weeks translating my digital archives into legal gold, working side by side with David. Every time Michael's team tried to claim a deduction or hide an asset, I had the original paper trail to expose the lie. The pressure mounted not just on Michael, but on his company, Apex Dynamics. Our legal team started hinting at bringing corporate fraud charges into the divorce, arguing that Michael's deliberate deception in the divorce proceedings extended to misleading investors about the company's true ownership and asset valuation. This threat hit Michael where he truly lived: the company's reputation. The board of directors at Apex, who had always treated me with polite indifference, began calling David. They didn't care about Michael's moral character, but they terrified of a corporate lawsuit that could tank their stock price and trigger investor panic. Their loyalty wasn't to Michael, it was to their own portfolios. The settlement offer finally came 6 months later. It wasn't a gentle negotiation, it was a surrender. Michael's legal team offered a settlement that was so far beyond his initial insulting offer, it was breathtaking. They didn't just concede the house and all marital assets, they offered me a massive cash buyout of my intellectual property claim in Apex Dynamics. The numbers were dizzying. It was a sum equal to a 45% ownership stake at the company's current valuation, paid out over 2 years, plus a substantial monthly maintenance fee that was non-negotiable. It was his desperate attempt to keep the full scandal from going public and involving the SEC. I sat with David, looking at the final document. The number was so large, it felt unreal. "They're giving you nearly half the company's current value, Sarah. They're terrified of you." I signed the papers, my hand steady. There was no joy, no triumphant cackle, only a quiet, profound satisfaction. I didn't want his company. I wanted the proof that I was worthy, that my work mattered, and that his greed would not go unpunished. I had forced the entire corporate structure to recognize my worth. When the final hearing concluded, I didn't even look at Michael. His face was a picture of bitter, defeated rage. His arrogance had been systematically dismantled piece by piece, by the very numbers he thought only he understood. He left the courtroom a wealthy man, yes, but a man exposed, humiliated, and poorer by nearly $500 million. I walked out of that courthouse alone, but I wasn't ruined. I was free. I had a new financial portfolio, a new sense of power, and a clean slate. I used a portion of the settlement money to found my own financial consulting firm, Vance Analytics. This time, I was the visionary, the founder, and the CEO. My company was built on the foundation of honesty and meticulous detail, the opposite of Michael's empire. My life wasn't defined by the bitter ending of a marriage, but by the powerful beginning of my own creation. Michael thought he could steal my past and limit my future, but I proved that the woman he tried to erase was the only one who truly knew the value of the kingdom he lost. My revenge wasn't loud or emotional. It was a cold, precise mathematical equation that proved his worth was finite, and mine was just beginning. I took his kingdom and built a better one. And that, I realized, was the richest victory of all.